While rescue teams were still pulling people from the rubble in La Guaira, before the world even knew how bad the damage would get, two numbers landed on newswires out of Washington: 150 million. That's the size of the first emergency aid package the United States pledged to Venezuela within 24 hours of the earthquakes. And by Saturday, officials were already signaling that a second, even larger package was on the way. This is the financial side of the disaster, the one playing out in pledges, press conferences, and cargo planes, almost as fast as the death toll itself. Here's exactly where that first $150 million is going. The U.S. State Department split it two ways: $100 million routed into a United Nations humanitarian fund specifically set up for Venezuela, and $50 million sent directly to aid organizations already working inside the country, including Samaritan's Purse, Catholic Relief Services, the World Food Program, and the UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. On top of the money, the Pentagon committed aircraft to assess damage and move supplies, plus naval support. The amphibious transport ship USS Fort Lauderdale and the littoral combat ship USS Billings were both ordered into the region. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters the response would be a whole-of-government effort, big, fast, and coordinated across agencies. What makes this response notable is the comparison analysts are already drawing. Less than a year earlier, when a major earthquake struck Myanmar, the U.S. sent a 3-person assessment team and no search and rescue unit at all, a gap widely linked to cuts at USAID. This time, 2 search and rescue teams were federalized and deployed, the first time in over a decade the State Department activated units beyond its top 2 standing teams. By Saturday, a senior U.S. official confirmed a new package in the 9 figures, meaning at least $100 million more, was being finalized for announcement within days. The U.S. isn't carrying this alone. Brazil's president announced a flying field hospital, sending 36 firefighters and 8 risk assessment specialists aboard a military transport aircraft, followed by a second flight carrying 100 solar-powered water purifiers and surgical supplies. France committed 85 search and rescue specialists, with President Macron saying the country stood ready alongside its European partners. Germany made up to 6 military transport aircraft available on short notice to move rescue workers and equipment. El Salvador's president sent 300 rescuers and paramedics along with 50 tons of equipment and medical supplies. Mexico, Colombia, Cuba, and Canada all dispatched personnel or aid in the earthquake's first 48 hours, alongside UN-coordinated search and rescue units from multiple countries. More detail keeps emerging on exactly who's arriving. Miami-Dade Fire Rescue's Urban Search and Rescue Team, designated Florida Task Force 1, was flown in aboard U.S. Air Force C-17 Globemaster aircraft, 80 personnel and 6 K-9 teams, deployed under State Department coordination. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum confirmed a separate military rescue contingent from her country's Secretariat of National Defense, working alongside the Fairfax County and Los Angeles County teams the U.S. sent in the earthquake's first hours. At the United Nations, Aid Chief Tom Fletcher said UN-certified rescuers were being mobilized specifically to support the search for survivors, framing it as a commitment to reach people while there was still time. By Friday, at least 30 separate international search and rescue teams were working inside Venezuela at once, a scale of foreign deployment the country hasn't seen in any disaster in decades. Beyond the Americas and Europe, the list keeps growing. India sent 2 Air Force aircraft carrying a 41-member medical team, a full field hospital unit, 2 additional portable hospitals, 30 tons of relief supplies, and 6 tons of medicine, with Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar saying India remained committed to standing by Venezuela's government and people. The Netherlands committed roughly $2.3 million specifically to fund a search and rescue deployment, while the Czech Republic assembled and prepared its own rescue team for departure within days of the quakes. China's Red Cross Society confirmed it would send its own rescue and medical relief personnel, layering onto the Chinese government's earlier, broader pledge of support to one of its key oil trading partners. The response didn't stop with governments. The European Union activated Copernicus, its satellite mapping system, to help direct rescue efforts on the ground. And in a smaller but symbolic gesture, Pope Leo sent an initial €100,000 emergency donation through the Vatican, with officials saying more would follow as needs become clearer. On the ground in Caracas, officials have been giving near-daily updates on how the aid is being absorbed. Acting President Delcy Rodriguez reported that electricity had been restored to roughly 60% of pre-earthquake levels by Saturday, and that more than 14,000 personnel were working in La Guaira alone, though access to the hardest-hit zones remained restricted while search operations continued. A U.S. official confirmed American teams had helped repair one of the runways at Simón Bolívar International Airport, easing a major bottleneck that had been slowing the flow of incoming aid flights. The Venezuelan government also activated a new emergency hotline, 0800-RESCATE, for residents to report missing persons or request assistance directly. But there's a complication running underneath all of these pledges. Venezuela has spent years under sanctions from the U.S. and other Western governments, and while some of those restrictions have eased in recent months, the country's banking system still isn't built for a sudden influx of international money. Aid groups on the ground say that's exactly why so much of this assistance is arriving as equipment, personnel, and direct partnerships with NGOs already operating inside Venezuela, like Samaritan's Purse and Catholic Relief Services, rather than as cash transfers to the government itself. It's a workaround, not a fix, and it means tracking exactly how much aid is reaching survivors versus sitting in transit is far harder than simply adding up the headline pledges. Not every part of the response has moved at the same speed. Reporting from inside the country describes a slower domestic rollout than the scale of incoming international aid would suggest. Foreign teams arriving within 24 to 48 hours, while several affected communities say government coordination on the ground hasn't kept pace with the need. That gap is part of why ordinary Venezuelans have stepped into the response themselves. Residents in Valencia, organizing their own overnight supply runs to La Guaira, diaspora communities from Florida to Georgia collecting and shipping donations independently, and aid organizations publicly appealing for cash contributions over physical goods, arguing that money can move through local markets in hours, while donated boxes can sit in customs for days. There's a deeper reason the aid system is being tested so hard right now. Even before the earthquakes, Venezuela's humanitarian sector had already absorbed a separate blow: years of funding cuts following the dismantling of USAID, the same agency that historically led American disaster response in Latin America. Aid groups like the International Rescue Committee, which has worked inside Venezuela since 2021, say the country was already running on a thinner support system than it had during past crises, reaching around 75,000 people in 2025 alone, a fraction of what's now needed. That's part of why officials keep stressing that financial donations, not material goods, are the most effective way for outside groups to help. Cash can be spent locally and quickly, while donated supplies often get stuck in customs and logistics chains that are themselves damaged by the earthquakes. Add it all up: the U.S. commitments, Brazil's hospital flights, France and Germany's aircraft, El Salvador's rescue teams, India's field hospital, the Netherlands and Czech Republic's deployments, China's Red Cross response, the EU's satellite support, and the Vatican's donation. And the total international response is already running into the hundreds of millions of dollars just 4 days in. And by every indication coming out of Washington this weekend, that number isn't finished growing. The next announcement could come within days. What's still unclear is whether the money can move faster than the damage is spreading. Subscribe to stay ahead of what's coming next in this story, and every disaster reshaping the world right now.